Hey, everybody, welcome back for another episode of our Business and Life Stories interview show. Today, Stephen Cook is with us again. Very excited to have you back, Steve. Welcome.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of good response to our last interview with you, so we're really glad you could join us again. And today, you were going to talk to us about keeping your battery charged, how to maintain good physical and mental disciplines and mental health and physical health, and how you train your staff to do that at the job, the importance of it. And also as part of that, it's become very prevalent, particularly in North America, for a number of people to just complain about things and never actually engage in rational discourse, never talk to the person about whom they're complaining. This is a challenge for a lot of startup companies and early stage companies. It's a huge challenge. So, talk to us about how to deal with that, and maybe even some ways to, obviously you can't prevent the complainer because often we don't know they're complaining, but
right.
what are some things you can do about it? So take it away.
I think for me, I think keeping my battery charged is very important. And again, I mentioned in the last interview that I've learned that for me, I think there's a great deal of intentionality to what I do. I'm very, very thoughtful about my life, and I structure my life. And, I think my grandmother was the one who became the example for me, because she was up early, she was reading, she was preparing herself for the day, and she dressed well, and she ate well, and she exercised. And it was just like, she was like a really, really good role model for me. And unfortunately, I fell away from that, and from my past, and pursued some pretty negative, destructive things. But when I came back to living a very a purposeful life, I'll put it that way, when I was thinking about where I wanted to go and the person I wanted to be, and I found myself more and more in leadership positions, I found that as I was taking on greater responsibility, and as I was working with people, and I had people under my charge, under my care, I found that it was very important for me to maintain good health on many levels. And so about 7 or 8 years ago, if you'd have seen me, I was almost I was weighing in about 250 pounds, and now I'm down to about 185. I've learned to manage my eating habits. I've learned to do things in moderation. I've learned to eat better. I've learned to maintain a certain amount of exercise, whether it's walking or being on my recumbent bike, which I just recently got a new one. I used to jog for years, but I have to maintain that physical health. I have to get a good night's rest. If I am not charged, if I'm not rested, when I come into work, then I'm already my own worst enemy. I'm working against myself at that point, because I tend to be a little bit more edgy. My focus isn't as sharp. Basically, they're not getting the best of Steve. And I've learned about myself that I can literally time my day, because I'm up every morning. I'm in bed at night at 6. I'm usually up between 2 and 3, and that's my study time. But my work day usually goes from 7 to 3. But I know if I'm going to maintain peak performance, that's usually going to occur from the moment I walk in the door at 7 until about 1 o'clock. About 1 o'clock, I start tapering off a little bit, and mentally I'm not as sharp, and I'm just on that downturn. And I've learned to become very aware of my decline in those moments. And it's in those moments I think I'm probably more vulnerable. I'm more susceptible to not handling a situation as well as I could, or as well as I should. So again, I just try to be very structured about my day. I try to plan my meetings early. I try to have my conversations early. If I'm going to interact with people, if I'm going to deal with a problem, I want to do it when my battery's charged. Now, the kind of work that I'm in, being a case manager, we go out in the field and we go into clients' homes. And again, we're dealing with people that are elderly. We're dealing with people that are impoverished. We're walking into homes that in many cases are hoarder situations. It may be infested with all sorts of critters. And so when you walk in, it immediately, you're almost defensive, and you're sort of on guard mentally, emotionally, physically, but at the same time you're there for them. So you have to be courageous. You have to come in, and you have to be smart about it, and you have to play poker. So when you come into very difficult situations, you're there for them. And you have to get past your, whatever you're dealing with, whatever uncomfort you may have in that moment, because you're there for them. But that drains you. And you go from client to client to client, and sometimes in short order. I mean, you can drain your battery pretty fast, and you have to know yourself. It really does become something where you do have to engage in a great deal of introspection. But I think maintaining, again, sleep, good nutrition, good exercise, good socialization, my goodness, play. You have to have a time of rest. I love Ecclesiastes 4, I think it's verse 6, where Solomon wrote, one hand full of rest is better than two fists full of labor and striving after the wind. And I think there's wisdom in that you have to have a certain amount of rest and relaxation to your life, again, to maintain that good mental and physical health. And I was talking with a friend of mine, because we were talking about even Christ at the time when he was in ministry upon the earth. You have several instances where he goes away by himself to a mountain to pray. And, even Jesus in his humanity grew weary. Even Jesus needed to get away at times by himself and to rest. And you can't neglect that, because, that's all very interconnected. And when I think about life, it's easy for me to think in terms. I used to have a professor that used to talk about systems analysis, and he would kind of blow my mind, because he would talk about how the weather affects the economy, which can affect politics, which can affect society and culture. And all of these things are very interconnected systems, and one storm that occurs down in Florida can affect the whole nation, as far as, shipping and transportation of goods and commodities and prices going up and down. And, just all of life is interconnected. Well, guess what? This biological machine right here is a very complex piece of machinery. It's very complex. And so you have to be, it's like having a Ferrari in some ways. I mean, it's extremely complex. And so you have to maintain your body, you have to maintain your health. And there's certain factors that go into that. And so when I'm dealing with my staff, because of the kind of work we do, because the department that I'm in, we have case managers and they're out in the community, mental health is very, very important. And so, we're very intentional about our culture within the agency that I'm at. And so we try to foster a culture that is relaxed, one that is encouraging, one that is supportive. But I have to start as that central point, because if I'm going to be part of this culture, and I'm not neutral, by the way, when I come in and I approach it as, I'm not going to be a victim here, because there are things that are going on and forces at work and people that are coming at me. And sometimes, they're just angry or they're upset in the moment, something happened. But again, I have to respond and not react. And so I have to approach it with the mindset that I can't control all the situations or all the attitudes and actions, but I don't want to be controlled by them. And I have to have a governing set of virtues and values that dictate how I think, how I perceive, and how I respond in those situations. And those have to be conscious, very much in my mindset when I come in. So when I come in, again, there's intentionality there, that when I approach people, when I approach situations, I want to approach it when I'm, feeling good, best time of the day, right attitude, and to try to foster that. And this kind of goes into another issue where I have some people who can become very negative. Something happens, and I actually learned this from a business communication professor that I had many years ago when I was in undergraduate school. And he was a retired lieutenant colonel, and he would walk into class and at the beginning of the class, he would say, okay, now I'm going to let you know there's going to be pop quizzes. And so I remember the couple days, a couple weeks into the class, he walks in and he says, all right, everybody, put your books away and get out a blank piece of paper. This is your opportunity to excel. And you hear this collective groan, and everybody's putting their books away and they're pulling out the paper and stuff like that. But what he said, it caught me off guard, because you could take it as an opportunity to fail. You could take it as an opportunity to complain. And I think that tends to be the knee-jerk response for a lot of people. But after about the third or fourth time of him saying that, throughout the semester, I thought to myself, it really is perspective. It really is how you see the situation. And so when you have that difficulty arise, Is it an opportunity to fail? Is it an opportunity to complain? Or is it an opportunity to excel and an opportunity to shine? And I adopted that same language. So when I'm in my department and something comes down, and yeah, it's difficulty, it's difficult. You've got already a lot on your plate you're dealing with, and you're trying to manage things, and you're trying to, give best performance, for all your projects, and something new comes along. And the knee-jerk response is to have that sort of groan thing.
Right. Who can I give this to? Or, where does this go in my stack of stuff? Sure.
Exactly. But there's a point where, even though I think that is our natural proclivity to be that way, I think we're kind of wired that way. And I think culturally we're brought up to think that way and be that way. Again, intentionality, that I have to fight against that. And so the mindset shifts, and I have to catch that thought or that knee-jerk response, and I have to shift that. And when I'm in the group, I say, all right, guys, this is our opportunity to grow. This is our opportunity to shine, and verbalize that. And what I've learned is that repetition for me is key. It is absolutely key, not only to my own learning. It's true when you're learning a language and you're learning paradigms like Hebrew paradigms or Greek paradigms. You learn to repetition, luo, lues, lue, luamen, luete, lusi, luso, luses, luse, lusamen, lusete, lususi, and you go over the verb paradigms over and over and over. And after a couple thousand times of doing that, it's so ingrained in your thinking, you don't even think about it anymore. You can do it in your sleep.
Like learning Russian or Spanish, the same thing. You have to do the verb paradigms over and over until they.
You're absolutely right.
Sense.
Well, that's true to life. And if you're going to shift your own attitude when you're in that situation, I don't know who coined the phrase. Chuck Swindoll was the first one I heard that said, but he says, sow a thought and reap an action. Sow an action and reap a habit. Sow a habit and reap a character. Sow a character and reap a destiny. But that logical progression from thought to action to habit to character to destiny, again, it starts with what you think. And so you keep inserting that thought, and you keep pushing back against that thing that is not helping you, that negative attitude, whether it's yourself, but it has to start with you. You can't control everything and everybody, but you don't want to be controlled by it. And so there's a point where when I come into the group, I want to be repetitious, and people know me, they know, and I'm unapologetic about it. I will say the same thing 1,000 times. If that's what it takes for it to get into your thinking and to get into the culture, you know what? I'm unapologetic. Repetition is the rule of the game, and I will keep popping with it, and it'll be in my emails, it'll be in my discussions, it'll be in my memos, it'll be in everything that I communicate, and people pick up on that. And so
I think it's really powerful, because it sounds like what you're saying is it's not just saying the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
It's in the emails, it's in all the forms of communication that you do.
That's right.
To imbue the culture and imbue your team with this thing that you're trying to get them into, right? Mm-hmm. That's so powerful, because what we see time and again are people telling us, well, I got so-and-so complaining at work, or this person's doing this, or blah, blah, blah. I can't get them positive. Mm-hmm. Right. These are business founders that are real excited. They've got they all have the world's greatest idea. That's how they have the initiative to go make it happen. But
right.
Yeah. So that's really strong. So it's not just the same avenue of communication all over and over. It's all avenues.
It is
the same
all
message.
Avenues. And it's consistency, and you have to be consistent, and you have to be persistent. You have to keep at it. And I've had some people, and granted, there are some people that will never come around. That's just reality. I mean, you're just not gonna be able to affect everybody the same way. But those people who are open, those people who are open to being taught and who are open to being led, if they trust you, if they respect you, eventually some of that enthusiasm begins to roll off on them, and they pick up on it, and they begin to pick up on the language, and little by little, again, you can help shift the culture a little bit. Again, like from the last lesson, the last discussion we had, the culture is never the product of chance. Culture is the product of choices that people make. And it's just like right now, I've been working in prison ministry for over 15 years. I came out of prison, and that's what I got into, was prison ministry. But I tell the guys, I say, look, prison culture is no better or worse than its population. Well, that's true in prison. And that's true in the workplace. It's true in American culture. It's true in a family. it's literally true wherever there are people to come together, because you have micro cultures and macro culture. And but again, there's intentionality there. And I don't want to come in as a neutral player. I want to come in as somebody who's here to affect change. Now, here's where it gets to be a little challenging at times, and this is where I think I kind of have to check my own attitude. Is I'm responsible for output, not outcomes. And this becomes a bit of a challenge, because in the world, often the outcomes become the metric by which we measure success. We show that we've moved the needle, that we started here and we're up here, and the data shows it, and I think that sometimes that can be massaged or manipulated if you're trying to control the outcome.
Definitely.
Sometimes the data isn't true.
Right.
We can tweak the data, but I realize at the end of the day, I'm responsible for me, and I'm responsible for my output, and I can't control the outcomes. I hope for the best. I wish for the best. I desire the best. I'm intentional. I push for the best. And I want that to rub off on my coworkers, on my peers, my staff. But at the end of the day, there are some people that will not respond to that. And some people, it's better that they go away. It's better that they leave and go somewhere. If they're not happy, then by all means, I want you to be happy. And, if you want me to, help you find another place to go, I'll give a review for you. I mean, and you have to be honest with people. And I see this is another thing. You don't want to be positive to the point of dishonest. I'm a realist, and I think you can be a realist and an optimist at the same time. I don't think that those are necessarily in tension with each other, although they can be. But at the same time, you want to be honest with people. And there's times where I've had to call people into my office and say, you know what? I don't know if you didn't sleep very well. I don't know if you're hungry and or if someone just got to you today, but you need to check your attitude a little bit, and maybe go home and take a nap, regroup, have a meal, come back tomorrow, and we'll start fresh. Sometimes it's as simple as that. Sometimes it is a simple fix. But there's times where you do have to address it with people, if for no other reason than you don't want the negative attitude to begin to spread, because there are some people that if they get into a culture can undo what you're trying to do. And again, I think it's a delicate balance. And I think the larger the organization becomes, the more difficult that is. When a group is small, you can maintain a culture, and you can have that real close camaraderie. But as the group begins to grow and you become more and more distant from people, it's harder to have that direct influence on people. It really, really is a challenge. So I think that's some of the things that I try to do when I come into any organization. I don't care if it's a church, if I'm coming in with my wife. I mean, when I come home, I want her to have the best of Steve. When I come home, I want to be there for her. I want to love her. I want to make her feel appreciated. And sometimes that's in very tangible ways. A hug, helping with the dishes, because she does a lot of work around the house, and she's very, very good at, keeping the house up and everything. But there's a point where it's like, when I come in, I want to be there for her. And so, again, that's important to me, but I think that's true for any relationship. I don't care if it's your spouse, your children, your parents. I mean, I even had to restructure my life for a while when I was caring for Mom in the final years of her life, because I was it. I mean, I was the only family member in town. I was the only game in town, so to say. And I had to let go of certain things. I had to step down from a VP slot down to a case manager slot, because I needed to have the time freed up so that I could care for her to the degree that she needed to be cared for. Because I believe in honoring your mother and father. And I believe that has to be very tangible. So I had to manage her assets. I had to manage her medicine, her doctor appointments. I had to keep her place clean. And in the midst of all that, as she's slipping into dementia in the final years, and I show up and she doesn't even know who I am sometimes. She's like, "Are you my son or my grandson?"
Oh my.
And I say, "Yeah." And I say, "Well, Mom, who do you want me to be today?" And is that upsetting? Of course it is. But look, she's operating on more of an emotional level, and I have to treat her on the level that she's at. And again, you've got to be professional. You have to keep those emotions in check. You have to maintain composure, because it's not about you, it's about her. And you cannot have a meltdown, and you need to be the best that you can be. And so for me to be that for her meant that I had to restructure my life to do it. Now that she's passed, my life is opening up again. I'm expanding, ministry opportunity. I'm writing more. I'm doing more video production. My podcasts are expanding. But again, it's one of those things where you have to think about, what's important to you, what your priorities are, and be willing to structure your life accordingly.
So when you're dealing with people at work who are in a negative mindset perpetually, where they're consistent complainers, how do you approach them, and how do you know like how deep to dig into a subordinate's life, right? Because you obviously want to get to the deep pain. I mean, that's what we do with our clients. We get to their deepest pain in business and figure out how to how we're going to help them get out of that and get successful, right?
Yeah.
But when someone's working directly for you, particularly in a company that you don't own, which you're not the owner of Meals on Wheels,
right?
How do you know when to stop or how deep to dig? What are some of the things you look for? Because the whole intent, of course, is to help them, because you want the outcome that they're going to quit complaining, but it's only going to happen when they see some reason to not complain, right?
Right.
So how do you help them get their life better so that complaining is not a way of life for them?
Yeah, that's a very difficult subject, and I don't know that there's a single answer. It's a very nuanced issue because there's a multitude of reasons as to maybe why they're complaining, why they're in that mindset. Maybe their life needs to be restructured. Maybe they need to let go of something. Maybe they've had a death in the family. Maybe they're dealing with a parent that has dementia and they're just worn out because they're, caring for mom all the time, and they're showing up at work and, on 2 hours of sleep for the last, couple nights. So you try to get to understand the person first. I think for me is you want to try to consider, what's going on there. I remember reading a book recently, and there was a story about a man who was on a subway train, and he was next to another man whose 2 young boys were running around and somewhat chaotic, and the man was over there just sort of disconnected and detached, and the boys were creating chaos, and the father was just like had his head down, and this man was becoming very irritated because these boys were causing havoc, and this father just really was just not doing anything and was just sort of closed off. And after a 5 or 6 minutes of being irritated, finally the man looked over at the father and he said, why don't you get a hold of your boys? Why don't you, exercise some discipline? And, they're causing trouble. And the man looked up and had sort of startled eyes, and he kind of looked around and he looked at the man and he goes, "I'm sorry." He said, "My wife just died. And my boys don't know how to act because they're processing, what just happened." And as I read the story, and it was a true account, by the way. As I read the story, I was somewhat seized by it because I thought, I could see myself being that irritated person. I could see myself being that one who's irritated at this man who's not restraining. But now, don't get me wrong. There's people out there that, I think, should, be a little better parents and trying to rein their kids in so they're not such an irritant. But until you know, I think sometimes you have to suspend judgment on certain issues. And I think you have to bring in the fact that sometimes people may be dealing with a major life crisis. They may be dealing with something that has just totally derailed them. And it may explain why they're completely apathetic. I've been in that situation where I've had a staff member who completely shut down because of a crisis in her life, and my heart went out to her, and her production seriously declined for months. And you try to intervene, you try to be positive, but there's a point where I did have to intervene, and I did have to say, look, I'm here to support you, I'm here to help you, I'm here to, I desire your success, I'm trying to come along, but at some point, we can't keep doing this because other people are being impacted, other staff, clients, and so at some point, I need you to pull back here. I need you to get your stuff together. And interestingly enough, she responded to that. And that was exactly what she needed. She needed somebody to come in and just say, hey, look, let's step it up here. Not that I can determine her level of grief. Don't misunderstand me. And I certainly am not doing that. But there's a point where she needed an expectation put upon her, and she needed some structure. And so we talked about, okay, I need this and this and this. And it took her eyes off of the things that was causing her stress, and she could focus on something else that was more productive. And in that sense, it actually became somewhat therapeutic. For her to focus upon work and not think about the thing that was the grief in her life. And so you want to be careful when you're approaching somebody, and to the degree that you can, mine a little bit into their life and try to understand in a very sympathetic way, in a very caring way, in a very supportive way, I think is extremely critical. And because again, you don't know what somebody's dealing with. Now, on the other hand, you do have people that are problematic. I had a guy, I'm talking many years ago, when I used to was a assistant manager in a restaurant, and I had a young guy who was coming in. I'm pretty sure he was, stoned every other day, and
Oh
he
my.
he just didn't take his job seriously, and he would show up late, and he would do a poor job, and he had a really bad attitude. And it was really affecting the other staff. And finally, after about 2 or 3 times of talking to him and writing him, finally, he came in one morning, and I just termed him. I just said, you know what, this is not the job for you. You're obviously not taking it seriously. You're more of a problem than a help. And so, just pack up your stuff and go home, and, we'll cut you a check in a couple of days or something. But he needed to be terminated. And now his negative attitude was really, for him, more a matter of poor attitude and poor choices that he was making in life, as over against the other person who has maybe a track record of good performance, but they've been, again, derailed because of some major life issue. So again, I think it requires understanding. There's nuances to that. I think you have to be sensitive, but then there's times where let's be honest. You have to be firm. You have to. And so I would say take each case on its own merits, and just be mindful, and be sensitive to people. And the return on investment for that is very, very valuable, because if people feel like you care about them, if they feel like, and it's true, don't be genuine, be authentic, don't fake it. But when people know that you do care about them, when people do feel that you are invested in them and what's going on in their life, and not just the end result, not just the product at the end of the day, those people can be some of your best performers in the long run, because you've taken the time to invest yourself into them, and the payoff can be quite big. And I'll say this, my grandmother, and I keep going back to her, so forgive me, she was a big role model to me. But the 2 years that she was in my life as a young boy, the things that she invested in me, have yielded tremendous dividends. She is the return on investment. What she sowed into my life has just exploded. And she didn't get to see it. She died when I was 16 and in the middle of a crazy life. But when my life took a turn for the worst and I had to turn, or die, when that turn occurred, the seeds that she planted came to life, and they have blossomed. And the investment that she made in me has just paid off. And I believe in that. I believe in investing in people. I think that that's very, very important, that people know that. And so you can try to address that attitude and realize that sometimes it may be temporary, but, again, each situation you have to take on its own merits, I would say.
Indeed, you do. That's really valuable advice you're sharing for everyone. Yeah, it's so important to invest in our people and invest in our partners, invest in our subordinates, invest even in our shareholders, our investors who are helping fund us. It's important to invest in their lives to an extent, because the more that people know us and trust us and see that we're genuine about what we're doing, that it's better for everybody.
There's a general rule that I go by, and that is what you value, you make time for.
Yes.
And I think children understand that, because if you say I love you, which is a value statement, but you never actually make time for them, they know there's a disconnect there. And I think on a very human level, I think if you tell somebody you value them, but you don't make the time for them, it's just like, when somebody comes in and we're having a meeting, I will shut my phone off, or I will put it on silent mode and turn it down. I don't want to be distracted by that. I'll put my phone on do not disturb, my office phone, because I'm here for you. And I'm, again, intentionality. When they come in and sit down, I will put everything that you are there for them. And that becomes a discipline. Again, it becomes something that you structure your life in such a way that when somebody's in front of you, they have your attention, that you're there, and they know it. And again, it's a very tangible expression. And so I think that with that understanding that what you value, you make time for, I think that really says a lot. And I think people pick up on that. I think people know when you're true. They know when you're being honest, and when you're really giving them the time and the attention that they need. Francis Schaeffer, philosopher, theologian, tremendous, probably one of the best Christian philosophers, theologians of the 20th century, a brilliant man. He was marked by, in fact, there was a book that was written about him called Truth with Love. And I love that title because I think it captures, who he is as a person. And Francis Schaeffer published millions of books. I mean, his books were published in languages all over the world. And he was very influential in the 70s and 80s. But there was an introduction I was reading to one of his books one time where he was in Washington, D.C. He was visiting with the President Reagan, and he left the president's office and he went back to his hotel. But before he got to his hotel room, he was talking with one of the maids who apparently had a question about some life issue. And he wound up spending several hours in the hallway visiting with her and talking with her. And that to me says a lot, because here's a man who could talk with people who we would regard, nationally, politically, as very, very important people. And yet for Francis Schaeffer, he believed that there are no little people. And he believed that there are no little places of service. And so, he could very easily talk to the president and then turn around and spend 2 hours, visiting with the maid in the hallway, because people matter. And there are no little people in life, and there are no little places of surface. And, I have come to learn, and years ago, I used to think of ministry as a pulpit. I used to think of it very myopically. And I used to get frustrated because I wasn't in the place that I desired to be. But I learned that I had to come back and check my attitude and restructure my thinking from the biblical worldview, and realize that ministry is everybody, everywhere, all the time.
Yes.
It doesn't matter where I'm at. It doesn't matter if I'm talking to the president and CEO of a company and I'm giving a report. I've given presentations on the national level, on the state level. I mean, you stand in front of people and you talk what you know, and you talk out of your reservoir of knowledge, and you share valuable information that people walk away with, and they feel like, okay, I really laid hold of something there, and thank you for that. But at the same time, you have to be willing to sit with the homeless person and talk with the person in need, and talk with the person in the restaurant who's struggling, And so I think that I've learned that ministry, again, is everybody, everywhere, all the time. And I bring that mindset into work, because it doesn't matter who I'm talking with. If you're one of my staff, one of my employees, if you're a supervisor, I'm going to devote the time and attention to you so that you understand that you are valued, that you are appreciated. And again, I think people see that, and I think people respond to that. And sometimes you may plant seeds that may not come to life for some time later, but the important thing is that you're putting forth the effort to plant the seeds. And I think that kind of been my mindset over the years. So
this has been a really, really great interview. We can't wait to have you back again. Do you have any parting words?
I would say if you're going to structure your life, if you're going to start making some really important decisions, don't procrastinate. Procrastination is the thief of time and opportunity. And if you're going to structure your life, do it now. Don't wait. Start making those decisions to prioritize your life, to focus on what matters, and to really begin that and think through, what's important to you, and and to take care of yourself. To make sure that your battery is charged each day when you face the day. And so I would encourage you, don't wait. Anyway, I guess that would be my parting thought.
Those are great parting thoughts. Okay, folks, link to Stephen's website and books is down below this video. He's open to questions. Really easy to contact him through his website if you want to ask him anything. And thanks for being here. If you liked the video, click like. If you didn't like it, send us an email and tell us what you would like to see.
Yeah, absolutely.